Good morning, friends. Today we'll continue in Romans 8 by adding the next verse to what we read yesterday. So in Romans 8:28 and 29 we read, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers." Now this is where the Apostle Paul goes really deep. We have the awesome promise of verse 28, but here in verse 29, Paul is starting to explain why we can have confidence in that promise. And so he's telling us of God's work from eternity past all the way through until our future and eternal glorification, which we'll get to in verse 30. But he starts off talking about those whom God foreknew. And this is that same group of people, as he says in verse 28, will have all things work together for their good. God calls a certain group of people according to his purpose, and the reason why God calls those people is because of his foreknowledge. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined. Now we'll get to the idea of predestination tomorrow, but for today, let's just examine what it means for God to foreknow his people. Many people believe that this simply means that God knows about stuff in advance, beforehand. And that seems logical enough. You break down the word foreknow, and you get knowledge beforehand. And that's entirely logical. But where people go wrong is misunderstanding what is meant by the knowledge part. Because what most people assume is meant is a passive knowledge, as if God is simply aware of the information regarding the people who will accept him. But that's not the biblical concept of knowledge. And the best way of understanding what is really in view here is to go right back to the beginning with Adam and Eve. In Genesis 4, verse 1, we're told, "Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived." Now, we're not saying that God knows us in the same physical way as Adam knowing his wife, which resulted in a pregnancy, of course. Rather, the point is that the kind of knowing Adam did with Eve was personal, it was purposeful, and it was active. And that is the essence of how God knows us. God knows us in a personal, purposeful, active way. And that makes all the sense in the world when we match this idea up with Paul's earlier statement that God's people are called according to his purpose. Paul's not talking about something that God did passively, where things are based on the agency and the purpose of the man or woman in question. No, clearly God makes an active choice for his own purposes regarding who he is going to call. And this really hits home when we then understand the personal nature of this active choice on God's part. Adam knew Eve according to a personal and intimate love. And again, when it comes to God, you can remove the physical element from it, but it is worth noting that this is where the physical relationship between husband and wife is the merest shadow of God's loving relationship with all his people, and it's one more reason why the institution of marriage and the marriage bed itself should be protected and remain unsullied. But in any case, going back to the theology of Romans 8:28 and 9, in any case, God didn't simply draw people's names from a hat, nor did he just sit idly by and see who would choose him. No, from eternity past, before he created anything or anyone, he knew us in that active and personal and purposeful way he chose to love us. And it is this active, personal, purposeful choice on his part that I hope will be so uplifting to you. You didn't come to faith on accident. You didn't do it yourself, nor did you just happen to win the cosmic lottery. God chose you, not based on anything in you, but according to his goodness and the delight of his own pleasure. And God does not change. He does not go back on a commitment. He does not disregard his promises. He does not throw his people aside. He knew you from before the foundations of the world. He chose you actively and purposefully by his grace, in his mercy, according to the goodness of his will, and nothing and nobody can take that away. Have a good and godly day, friends, and if the Lord wills, I will see you tomorrow.